Meditations on Death, The Stoic Guide to Mortality, Memento Mori, and Living Without Fear. Ancient Wisdom from Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, and Epictetus for Acceptance, Grief, and Inner Peace by Aurelian Hart. Introduction. Imagine a city street filled with the loudest cheering you have ever heard. The air smells of incense and expensive wine. A man stands in a gold chariot pulled by 4 white horses. He wears a purple toga and has red paint smeared across his face. He looks like a god. This is a Roman general celebrating a triumph, the highest honor any human could achieve in the ancient world. The people scream his name. They throw flowers. For this one day, he is the center of the universe. He feels like he could live forever. He feels like nothing can touch him. But just behind him, standing in the same chariot, is a person who doesn't belong there. It is a slave, dressed in simple clothes. The slave isn't there to cheer. The slave has one job: to lean in and whisper in the general's ear over and over again, loud enough to be heard over the roar of the crowd. "Look behind you," the slave whispers. "Remember you are just a man. Remember you will die." This was not a punishment. It was a gift. The Romans knew that when things are going perfectly, we start to believe a lie. We start to believe we are special, that we are permanent, and that the clock isn't ticking for us. That lie makes us arrogant, and it makes us weak. By keeping death close, right there at his elbow, the general stayed grounded. He knew that because his time was limited, his choices on this day actually mattered. Now imagine a different scene, thousands of years later. A man stands in a 40th floor office in Chicago. His name is Julian Vance. He is 44 years old, and like that Roman general, he has reached a peak in his career. He is a senior attorney who helps very wealthy people plan what happens to their money after they pass away. He spends 10 hours a day looking at death on paper. He writes wills. He sets up trusts. He organizes the end of other people's lives with the precision of a clockmaker. But Julian is terrified. While he types out legal words about the deceased, his own heart starts to beat a little too fast. He looks at his hands and wonders if they look paler than they did yesterday. He checks his pulse on his neck when he thinks no one is looking. He has a beautiful wife, Sarah, and 2 daughters who need him, Maya and Chloe. But instead of enjoying dinner with them, Julian is often miles away in his own head, wondering if a stray cough or a weird headache is the beginning of the end. Julian tries to plan for every possible problem. He works extra hours to make sure his family will have enough money for 100 years, even though he's afraid he won't be there to see next month. He thinks that if he can just control enough things, his diet, his bank account, his schedule, he can keep the darkness away. But the harder he tries to hide from the idea of dying, the more it haunts him. He is living in a beautiful house, but he feels like a prisoner in a cell made of what-if thoughts. The great taboo. Most of us are a lot like Julian. We live in a world that is very good at hiding the end of the story. We push the sick and the elderly into buildings where we don't have to see them. We use filters on our photos to hide the fact that we are getting older. We talk about passing away or losing someone because the word dead feels too sharp, like a cold blade. We treat the end of life like a secret that we aren't supposed to talk about. We think that if we ignore it, it won't happen. Or at the very least, we think that talking about it will make us sad and depressed. We tell ourselves we will deal with it later. We say we'll start living our real life once we get the next promotion, or once the kids move out, or once we save enough money. But here's the problem. The more we hide from death, the more power it has over us. When we pretend we have forever, we waste our days on things that don't matter. We stay angry at people for silly reasons. We scroll through our phones for hours instead of looking into the eyes of the people we love. We stay in jobs we hate because we are afraid to take a risk. The fear of the end acts like a heavy fog. It settles over everything, making our joy feel a little less bright and our worries feel a lot bigger. This book is about a different way to live. It is based on a school of ancient wisdom called Stoicism. The Stoics, people like a Roman emperor, a former slave, and a wealthy advisor, didn't see death as a scary monster to be avoided. They saw it as a tool. They believed that by looking directly at our mortality, we could finally learn how to live with courage, purpose, and a deep sense of peace. The promise of the open door. You might be wondering why anyone would want to spend time thinking about their own end. It sounds gloomy. It sounds like something for people who have given up on life. But the truth is exactly the opposite. The goal of this book is not to make you sad. The goal is to set you free. By the time you finish these pages, you will have a new clarifying lens for your life. You will stop feeling like a victim of time and start feeling like the master of your own mind. You will learn how to drop the heavy weight of what-if anxiety. When you accept that you cannot control the length of your life, you stop wasting energy trying to. This leaves you with a massive amount of energy to focus on what you can control, your character and your actions today. Heal from the pain of loss. We will look at tools that help you process grief without letting it destroy your future. You will learn to see the people you love as gifts on loan rather than things you own. Find a sudden sense of urgency. You will stop saying someday and start doing the things that actually matter. You will realize that later is a place that doesn't exist. Face aging and health scares with a calm heart. You will learn that your value doesn't come from a young body or a perfect medical report, but from how you choose to handle the hand you are dealt. The Stoics used a phrase, memento mori. It means, remember that you will die. To them, this wasn't a threat. It was a reminder to be grateful. It was a way to wake up from the sleepwalk of daily life. Why trust the ancients? This isn't a book of modern positive thinking or empty slogans. This wisdom was forged in the middle of real life and death situations. We will learn from Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man in the world, who wrote his private thoughts while fighting a terrible plague and leading an army. He didn't have the luxury of hiding from death. It was all around him. We will listen to Seneca, who had to face his own execution with only a few minutes' notice and did so with such calm that his friends were amazed. We will study Epictetus, who started life as a slave, and realize that even if someone can kill your body, they can never touch your will. These men weren't perfect. They struggled with fear just like we do. But they practiced rehearsing the end so that when it arrived, or when life got hard, they wouldn't be caught by surprise. They found a kind of inner citadel, a fortress in the mind that nothing in the outside world could break. Julian's breaking point. To see how this works in the real world, we have to go back to Julian Vance. It was a Tuesday in November. Julian was at a cemetery on the outskirts of Chicago for a graveside service. It was for a client of his, a man who had spent 40 years building a massive shipping company, only to die of a heart attack at his desk. The air was damp and cold. Julian stood at the edge of the small crowd, wearing his expensive wool coat. He should have been focused on the service, but he wasn't. He was looking at the gray sky and thinking about a small pain in his left shoulder. Is that a heart thing? He wondered. Is it starting for me too? He discreetly slid 2 fingers onto his wrist, checking his pulse. It was fast. His chest felt tight. The priest was saying something about ashes to ashes, but all Julian could hear was the blood rushing in his ears. He felt like the ground was turning into water beneath his feet. He looked at the casket and didn't see his client. He saw himself. He saw his wife Sarah crying. He saw Maya and Chloe standing there without a father. The what-ifs hit him like a physical wave. He felt like he couldn't breathe. Without saying a word to anyone, Julian turned around and walked away. He hurried to his car, fumbling with the keys. He sat in the driver's seat, gasping for air, the heater blasting cold wind in his face. He was a 44-year-old successful man, and he was having a full-blown panic attack because he had run out of ways to pretend that he was permanent. Julian realized in that moment that he was dying every single day, not because his heart was failing, but because his fear was stealing his life before it was even over. He was an expert at planning for the end, but he had no idea how to live in the now. That night, Julian didn't go back to the office. He went home and sat in his quiet garage. He found an old, dusty box of his father's things. His father had died suddenly 2 years ago, and Julian had never really processed it. He had just worked harder to bury the pain. Inside the box, he found a small, tattered book with a yellow cover. It was a copy of Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. He opened to a page his father had marked with a pencil. It said, "You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think." Julian stared at those words for a long time. They felt like a bucket of ice water being poured over his head. He realized that for years he had been trying to build a wall against death. But the wall wasn't keeping death out. It was just keeping life from getting in. The roadmap ahead. Over the next several chapters, we are going to follow Julian as he tries to put these ancient Stoic lessons into practice. He isn't going to become a monk or move to a cave. He is going to stay an attorney in Chicago. He is still going to be a dad and a husband, but he is going to learn how to change his internal weather. We will start by looking at the idea that we die daily. Every moment that passes is already dead and belongs to the past. We will learn how to stop leaking our time into things that don't matter. We will explore a technique called premeditatio malorum. This sounds scary, but it is actually the best cure for anxiety ever invented. By thinking about what we fear most, we take away its power to surprise us. We will talk about the borrowed room. The Stoics believed our bodies and our lives are like a hotel room. We don't own them. We are just staying there for a little while. When we realize we are renting our lives, we stop being so angry when things break or when it's time to check out. We will also tackle the big questions. How do we deal with the death of people we love? What does legacy really mean? And is it worth chasing? How do we find completion so that if we died tonight, we could say we lived a full life? This journey is not about becoming cold or emotionless. Stoics weren't robots. They felt love, grief, and joy just like anyone else. The difference is that they didn't let those emotions drive the car. They used reason to stay on the road. The goal is to reach a point where you can look at the end of your story and not feel a sense of terror, but a sense of peace. You will learn to see death not as an enemy who steals your life, but as the boundary that gives your life its shape and its beauty. Think of it like a piece of music. A song is beautiful because it eventually ends. If a single note went on forever, it wouldn't be music, it would just be noise. It is the silence at the end that makes the melody mean something. Julian Vance is about to start his journey. He is tired of being afraid. He is tired of checking his pulse. He is ready to learn how to live. If you have ever felt that cold shiver of what-if thinking, or if you are carrying the heavy weight of a loss you can't let go of, this book is for you. You don't need a philosophy degree. You just need to be willing to look at the truth. Chapter 1. Mastering the Art of Dying Before You Die. The sand in the top of the hourglass is not a mountain. It is a tiny pile. Every single grain that falls through the glass is gone forever. You cannot reach into the bottom, scoop it up, and put it back. Most people live as if they have an infinite supply of sand. They spend their hours as if they were picking up pennies on a beach, thinking there will always be more. But the truth is much more urgent. Your life is not a long movie that is just starting. It is a candle that has been burning since the moment you were born. Some of the wax is already a puddle on the table. You don't know how much wick is left, but you do know it is getting shorter every time you blink. The Emperor in the Cold. In the year 170 AD, the most powerful man in the world sat in a dark, drafty tent. His name was Marcus Aurelius. Outside his tent, the world was falling apart. He was stationed along the Danube River, a cold and gray place far from the sun-drenched marble of Rome. His soldiers were not just fighting a war against Germanic tribes, they were fighting an invisible enemy. A terrible plague was sweeping through the army. Men who had survived dozens of battles were falling over dead from fever in their bunks. Marcus Aurelius was not a young man. His body was tired, his chest hurt, and he struggled to sleep. He had lost many of his children to illness. He had every reason to be terrified. He was the Emperor of Rome. He had the power to order 1,000 ships to sail, or to have a city built in his name. Yet, as he sat by his small lamp, he realized that all his power was a shadow. It could not stop the plague. It could not stop his hair from turning gray. It could not buy him a single extra minute of life. He pulled out his journal. He didn't write for an audience. He wrote to keep his own mind steady. He told himself that he could leave life right this second. He didn't mean he wanted to give up. He meant that the possibility of death should be the filter for everything he did. If he was going to say something, he asked himself, is this worth saying if I die tonight? If he was going to get angry at a clumsy servant or a lazy general, he asked himself, is this anger worth my last few breaths? He looked at his life as if he were a guest in a borrowed room. He realized that his body, his throne, and even his breath were just items he had rented for a short stay. He didn't own them. Nature was the landlord, and the landlord could ask for the keys back at any moment. This didn't make him sad. It made him focused. It stripped away the nonsense. When you realize the room isn't yours, you stop worrying about the wallpaper and start enjoying the view from the window. The great lie of later. There is a myth that almost everyone believes. We think death is something that sits at the very end of a long road. We picture it as a destination we will reach when we are 80 or 90 years old. Because we think it is far away, we treat our time like trash. We kill time by watching shows we don't like or arguing with strangers on the internet. We tell ourselves we will start living our real life later. We will be happy when we retire. We will be kind when we are less stressed. We will chase our dreams when the timing is perfect. The Stoic philosopher Seneca said this is a total delusion. He argued that we are wrong about where death is. Death is not waiting for us in the future. A huge part of death has already happened. Every hour, every minute, and every second that has passed behind you is already dead. You will never see yesterday again. You will never see the last 5 minutes again. That time has been handed over to death. We are dying daily. But we don't notice it because we are looking the wrong way. We are like people on a boat who are staring at the horizon, waiting to reach the shore, while the water behind them is already miles long. If you want to master the art of living, you have to stop thinking of death as a future event. You have to see it as a constant companion. It is the shadow that walks right behind your elbow. The attorney's quiet panic. Julian Vance sat in his office on the 40th floor of a glass tower in Chicago. His desk was covered in last wills and testaments. His entire job was helping people plan for what happened after they were gone. He was an expert in death on paper. He knew how to move money around so the government couldn't touch it. He knew who got the summer house and who got the family dog. But inside, Julian was a mess. Every time his heart skipped a beat, he felt a jolt of ice in his stomach. He checked his pulse 10 times a day. He looked at his 2 daughters, Maya and Chloe, and instead of feeling joy, he felt a sharp pang of fear that he wouldn't be there to see them grow up. He was so busy trying to ensure his future that he wasn't actually present in his life. He was a death expert who was paralyzed by the thought of dying. One night, Julian was cleaning out his garage. He found a box of things that had belonged to his father, who had died suddenly 2 years earlier. At the bottom of the box was a small green book with a cracked spine. It was a copy of Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. Julian opened to a page his father had marked with a yellow highlighter. It said, "You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think." Julian looked at his phone. He had 30 unread emails from clients complaining about tax codes. He looked at his hands. They were shaking. He realized he was spending his life, his actual non-refundable life, worrying about people who didn't even know his middle name. He was treating his time like it was an infinite resource, but his father's death had proven it wasn't. For the first time, Julian didn't look for his pulse. He just sat on a dusty crate and breathed. He realized that if he died right then, his last few hours would have been spent being angry at a spreadsheet. He closed his laptop and went inside to hug his daughters. He didn't do it because he was scared. He did it because he finally understood that the clock was ticking. Falling off the horse. In the year 1569, a man named Michel de Montaigne was riding his horse through the woods. Suddenly, a much larger horse ridden by one of his servants crashed into him. Montaigne was thrown into the air and slammed into the ground. He was knocked unconscious. His friends thought he was dead. They picked up his limp body and started carrying him home. When Montaigne finally started to wake up, he wasn't in pain. He felt like he was floating. He could feel his life leaking out of him, but it didn't feel scary. It felt like falling asleep. He later wrote that we spend our whole lives being terrified of the moment of death, but when he actually got close to it, it was the most peaceful thing he had ever felt. Most of our fear of death comes from our imagination. We imagine a dark monster or a painful struggle. But the Stoics teach us to look at death objectively. What is it really? It is just a biological process. It is the breath leaving the body. It is the heart stopping its work. If you take a scary mask and turn it over, you see it as just a piece of plastic. The Stoics want us to turn the mask of death over. When you die before you die, you are practicing that letting go. You are training yourself to see that you are not your body, you are not your reputation, and you are not your bank account. You are the conscious mind that is here right now. If you can learn to be okay with the idea of vanishing, nothing can scare you anymore. You become a free person. A person who is afraid of death can be controlled by anyone who threatens their life. But a person who has accepted their end is a person who can never be a slave. The body as a suit of clothes. In some ancient traditions, monks would go to cemeteries and sit. They didn't go there to be sad or weird. They went there to look at bodies that were breaking down. They would watch as the skin changed color and the bones became visible. They called this Maranasati meditation. The goal was to remind themselves, this body is made of the same stuff. This will happen to me too. This sounds gross to us today. We spend billions of dollars trying to hide the fact that we are biological. We use creams to hide wrinkles. We use filters on our photos to look younger. We build shiny boxes to live in and try to forget that we are part of nature. But the Stoics say this hiding is what makes us so anxious. When you try to pretend that a storm isn't coming, you jump at every sound of thunder. When you accept that the storm is inevitable, you just buy an umbrella and enjoy the sound of the rain. Think of your body like a suit of clothes. You didn't always have this suit. Before you were born, you weren't here in this form. One day the suit will wear out. It will get holes in the elbows. The buttons will fall off. Eventually, you will have to take it off and put it away. That is all death is. It is the returning of the borrowed materials to the earth. The carbon in your bones and the iron in your blood came from the stars and the soil. You are just holding on to them for a little while. When you realize you are just renting your atoms, you stop being so clingy. You stop acting like a spoiled child who doesn't want to share his toys. You start to feel a sense of gratitude. Instead of saying, "Why do I have to lose my life?" you start saying, "Wow, I can't believe I got to exist at all." Living as a finished work. Most people live their lives like they are writing a book and they are only on chapter 3. They assume they have 20 more chapters to go. If they died today, they would feel like the book was a failure because it was unfinished. The Stoics suggest a different way. They want you to live every single day as if the book is complete. If you died tonight, would you be okay with the story you left behind? This doesn't mean you have to win a gold medal or become a billionaire by 5 o'clock. It means you lived with integrity. It means you were kind to the people around you. It means you didn't waste your day being a jerk or a coward. If you treat every day as a mini life, you stop feeling cheated. When you wake up, it's a gift. When you go to sleep, you say to yourself, "I have lived." If you get to wake up again tomorrow, that's just a bonus. It's like going to a restaurant and having a great meal. If the waiter brings you a free dessert, that's wonderful. But if he doesn't, you aren't mad, because the meal was already enough. Marcus Aurelius lived this way even while he was surrounded by death and war. He didn't wait for the war to end to be a good man. He didn't wait for his health to improve to be a wise leader. He did it right then, in the cold mud of the Danube. He knew that the perfect time is a ghost that will never arrive. The only time that exists is the tiny sliver of now that you are standing on. Imagine you are reading a great story. It has heroes and villains and exciting adventures. Now, imagine that the story never ends. It just goes on and on for 10,000 pages. Eventually, you would get bored. The characters would stop mattering. The stakes would disappear. You would put the book down and never pick it up again. The only reason a story is beautiful is because it has an ending. The ending is what gives the beginning and the middle their meaning. Death is the final page of your life, and it is the best thing that ever happened to you. Without death, your life would be a boring, never-ending loop. You would never feel the urgency to tell someone you love them. You would never feel the thrill of a sunset, because there would always be another million sunsets. When you embrace your mortality, you aren't being morbid. You are being realistic. You are waking up from a dream. You are realizing that you are a mortal human being on a tiny planet spinning through space. You have a very limited amount of time to be useful, to be brave, and to be happy. Don't wait until you get a scary phone call from a doctor to start living. Don't wait until you are at a funeral to realize how much you love your family. Die to your ego today. Die to your excuses. Die to your fear of what other people think. When you die before you die, you find out that the person who is left behind is much stronger, much kinder, and much more alive than the person you used to be. Moving toward the light. Acceptance is not the same thing as giving up. Acceptance is the foundation of power. When a sailor accepts that the wind is blowing north, he doesn't sit down and cry. He adjusts his sails. When you accept that you are going to die, you stop fighting against reality and start using reality to your advantage. You start to notice the small things, the way the coffee smells in the morning, the sound of your child's laugh, the feeling of the sun on your skin. These things aren't extra. They are the whole point. We spend so much time worrying about the big things, money, status, fame, that we forget those things are just decorations in the borrowed room. They don't go with you when you leave. But the character you build and the love you give, those are the things that make the stay worthwhile. Julian Vance finally understood this. He went back to his office the next day, but he was different. He still did his work. He still helped people with their wills, but he didn't check his pulse. He didn't snap at his assistant. When a client started screaming about a small mistake, Julian just looked at him with calm eyes. He thought about the emperor in the tent. He thought about the horse falling in the woods. He realized that this man's anger was just a tiny puff of smoke in the grand scheme of the universe. Julian chose not to let it into his room. You have the same choice. You can keep running from the shadow, or you can turn around and shake its hand. You can keep pretending you have forever, or you can start living like today is the only day you have. The sand is falling, the wick is burning, the room is rented. It is time to stop being afraid of the dark and start being grateful for the light while it is still shining. This is the art of dying before you die. It is the only way to truly live. Marcus Aurelius ended his journal by telling himself to pass through this little space of time in peace. He said to end the journey with contentment. Just like an olive falls from the tree when it is ripe. It blesses the nature that produced it and is grateful to the tree that carried it. You are that olive. The world is that tree. The fall is coming, but if you have lived, it is not a scary place. Chapter 2. Memento Mori, the Mirror of Reality. The stylus is made of bone, sharpened to a fine point at one end, and flattened like a tiny shovel at the other. It rests in the hand of a man whose skin is like old parchment, lined by years of desert sun and the stress of advising an emperor. He presses the point into a wooden tablet filled with dark, smooth wax. As the bone moves, it peels back the top layer of the wax to reveal the light wood underneath. These scratches form letters, and the letters form a warning that has traveled across 2,000 years. This specific tablet is not just a notepad. It is a mirror. The man holding the stylus is Lucius Annaeus Seneca, known to history simply as Seneca. He is sitting in a room in Rome, surrounded by the finest things money can buy. Outside his door, the most powerful city in the world is screaming with activity. People are rushing to the forum to make deals. They are sweating in the baths, arguing over politics, and staying up late to count their gold. They are all living as if they will never die, and Seneca is about to tell them why they are wrong. He is writing a letter to a friend named Paulinus, a man who has spent his entire life working a high-pressure job managing the city's food supply. Paulinus is exhausted. He is always looking forward to the day he can finally stop, sit in a garden, and breathe. Seneca looks at the wax tablet and carves out a sentence that hits like a physical blow. You are living as if you were destined to live forever. The great theft of time. In the year 49 AD,